Ryan Girardot, man, it's good to see you again, buddy. I miss being with you. We had some good times, didn't we?
We did, man. It's been
Ryan
a while.
Girardot is the CEO of Cerebro Sports, and in a previous life, we worked together, a company called ePlay.
Previous,
Actually,
but not unrelated.
It was actually Players Revolution Sports, if I recall, back in the ancient days.
Man, and the Shamrock Basketball Association before that. Yeah.
So give me the gist of your dream and your vision. It started way back with Shamrock, and now you find yourself at Cerebro, and a lot's happened.
Yeah, you know, it's evolved, right? So when it first started out, it was just an adult recreational basketball league that I had started in my driveway back when I was like 13 years old. And I say adult recreational, I mean, we had kids, obviously. Yeah. But the idea was, the idea has always been centered around appropriate competition, high quality competition, getting better, right? And so after I grew my driveway basketball league, when I graduated college, when I graduated high school and went to college, I turned it into a statewide basketball league. I can't recall. I think that might have been around the first time that we met, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was slightly after, but that league was bought out by a company out of Chicago. I went to run adult rec leagues for them for a while all over the country. And as I did, I started to realize there's, again, in the spirit of facilitating like quality competition, we'd have one player show up and say, I'm intermediate, and others say the same. And the fact is, like, you picked up a basketball yesterday and made one shot, and you've graduated to intermediate status. And for me, I was an ex-college basketball player, and I'm just looking for a chill run, right? And so it ended up very mismatched. And so the idea with Players Revolution, where I know for a fact we started really working together, the idea for Players Revolution was that we were going to create this network of adult recreational leagues where we would facilitate a national tournament by way of using stats to better understand how players perform in all of these participating leagues all over the country. And so in order to do that, we needed to build an app. We'd called the app ePlay at the time, ePlay by Players Revolution. So had a few great co-founders and partners as we started to work on the app. One of those was yourself. It was really exciting at the time. I remember the first pilot that we did. We went down to the Duncanville Fieldhouse here in Dallas, and we facilitated this adult recreational game where we were going to use our app to keep score. And there was a basketball scout in the gym, and he came over to us and he said, what are you guys doing? And we told him we're keeping stats. And he's like, if you could keep stats for this, could you keep stats on like grassroots and high level basketball? And I mean, as soon as I heard that, I was like, hang on, you're telling me that they're not already doing that?
Certainly somebody's doing this.
Yeah,
right.
Somebody's tracking the data on all of these kids. And of course we found out that that was not the case. So the whole Players Revolution mission of this adult recreational network kind of went by the wayside. Not that we could never go back to it, and not that it's not necessary, but there's a bigger problem to solve here. And the problem is quantifying every player performance in the world and putting it into a single database that's searchable. And honestly, that's what evolved into Cerebro.
Right. So before we continue the story, let me hit pause there for a second. So you're a kid, literally, and created this business out of your driveway, and you had people coming from all over the area to participate, which your dream was to give opportunity to these people, either to get plugged into a rec league, which then evolved into much bigger vision.
For sure.
And so you needed help taking it from what was in your head and what you'd already kind of proved out at a small scale and say, I need branding, I need literally technology, where to turn for that.
100%.
I want to say when we first met, you had met with a guy, a real high-end programmer. I mean, like brilliant programmer. Who said, "Yeah, I'll help you do this." You just kind of take a flyer on it. But you had some challenges dealing with IT people.
Yes.
So I kind of came in and filled a unique role for you. Tell me what your thought process was, other than, hey, I found this guy, I like this guy. He may have some time. I kind of remember that deal at the coffee shop where you went, let me kind of tell you what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
What were you looking for at that point, and then kind of how did that evolve? What was unique about our connection at that point?
Coming from the startup world, investors like to back teams that have multiple people, and the reason why is it's difficult to find one Lone Ranger that has all of these different skill sets. And I mean, I imagine the same is true for businesses of all stages, but at our stage, early on in the tech sphere, we call that a co-founder, right? And so sure, I knew my limitations, so I had a vision, but to make it real, I needed partners. One of those partners was somebody that could code, but who was going to make it look good? Who was going to make it resonate with an audience? For that, I needed marketing assistance. And so I remember meeting you through someone that's in the media here in Dallas. He initially introduced me to you, and I think one of the first things we were looking for was apparel, if I'm not mistaken, apparel, flyers. The other thing I'll tell you about co-founders is you don't really realize how badly you need them until all of a sudden you're standing right there at the ledge and you're like, I can't build the bridge across this chasm. Could I find a professional?
You're in between chucking the whole dream and oh my gosh, I've found my co-founder.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I know we started with a few smaller projects, but through those, I felt like you were somebody I could work with. And
it was very mutual.
I
it was
appreciate
very
that.
quick how all that kind of came together.
Yeah.
And, obviously it has to be time and timing, and so but a lot of that came together. But
Yeah.
it does take a unique set of skills, and so there's a challenge for entrepreneurs and business owners to figure out, okay, do I have to play that role and juggle all these plates, or can I find somebody that can help do that? And at any level of any business, it becomes challenging, especially that we're getting in this age where there's so many tools. I mean, think about how the world's changed since we met there wasn't a lot of low-code opportunities for us to just, hey, let's put together in a matter of weeks and months a prototype.
I mean, case in point, Cerebro does not have like a real developer that works for us every day. Instead, we went with a low-code solution. We learned it moderately well internally, and most importantly, we hired an outside agency, and that's good enough to get funded nowadays. Back at that time, that was not the case.
Yeah. In other words, you've been able to cobble something together to give you an MVP, a minimum viable product, and test the theory.
Yeah, prove that it's a business.
Prove that it's business. And actually, so you now have X amount of subscribers. You actually have cash flow. Tell me kind of where. I know I'm jumping ahead. We'll come back. So we'll do a lot of. This is like Lost. We're going to jump forward, then we're going to jump back. So jump forward a little bit.
I never understood Lost, so I hope you do a little bit better job
probably
timing.
Probably not a good idea to interject an analogy that no one understands. Pick another.
What actually happened on Lost?
Anything you want it to happen.
Okay.
I think they decided to let the viewer decide what they want, which is to me a cop-out. That's a whole other story. So, in other words, you've got. Well, I can tell you this. We together created V1 of ePlay, and the concept, as I remember, was take the challenge, and that was create a tool to allow a teenager, a equipment manager, to take stats of a basketball game.
Yeah.
In real time, like a video game.
Because
and we made it.
Because that's the way that this could scale. That was the way we viewed it. That's the way it could scale. There are elements of that thesis that, by the way, I would now say are wrong, because to have truly NBA quality data, you have to have a true professional, and so there are flaws in that concept. However, at the end of the day, the end product that's produced, that thesis was 100% right. So yes, the whole world does. Shocker, the whole world does need data to make decisions. That is especially true in sports where it's impossible to go see everybody that's playing. And so at Cerebro, we take data from a number of different sources. At ePlay, at the time, there weren't that many sources of people that were trying to collect that data. Nowadays, there are a lot of people that try to collect that data. So we're aggregating all of those sources into one single place, into one unified database that's of a certain quality, and you can go see LeBron from the time he was in high school up until last night's Lakers game, as well as everything he did internationally and stuff. And there's a huge audience for that, whether it's what we started with, which would be college coaches and NBA teams and agencies, or as we get into 2023, increasingly it's It's not just those, but it can be international teams, it can be fans, it can be parents, players, any stakeholder that cares about the quantitative side of the story. They need this. So yeah, there's a huge audience, and the business is absolutely cash flowing at this point.
So where we were was the need to be able to capture that data. We took it head on by creating an app, and we succeeded. We were able to prove a concept, and we created something. Now, like most business, the timeline or that arc, you learn a whole lot. And one of the things that I'm really big on and will be as we go into 2023, and that is the power of failure. Now, whether you call some of the things we went through failures or just tests that gave us a positive or a negative.
Sure.
I watched you grow as an entrepreneur through those times. I watched how you listened to people. I watched how you watched. And I think it was critical that you had people around you and partners that understood that process, that those kind of quote unquote failures are so valuable and part of the process. Because I saw you go, I don't look at that as a failure per se, but even if I did, it's so valuable. I couldn't put a cash value on that because
Absolutely.
I got to know. I have experience, and I remember having meetings where there were people in our circle that were just doomsayers. And this company, this, and somebody's going to knock us off, somebody's going to steal this. And every time, I think, when things settled, you had this calming voice to say, you know what, guys, name me one company or one group that we've got a 1 or 2 year head start on all these people. And so the value of having that, yes, there's always going to be threats, but the ability to say, we did this first, and here's what we learned, and be proud of that and not hide that and go, there were so many people who were like, cover that up and don't spin that, don't talk about that.
Definitely.
Being raw, have you learned a lot about going, this is what we did, this is what we know, and this is what we'll do next time. Even just then you say it, if I look back on it, I was going to ask you, how valuable is having an app now to take score? It's probably you probably are partnering with other people that do that, and now you're focused on this.
Totally. So, I mean, to the point about failure, your first theory is never going to be 100% right, especially if you're pursuing a really, really large mission. We were accused back at that time of trying to boil the ocean, and I mean, in some cases that's right. But again, the genesis of ePlay was, as I saw it, it was solving a problem for us to get to the end goal of doing what we are doing now. But we couldn't be where we are now if there weren't people that were providing data. And so, yeah, I mean, as it turns out, there are better ways to collect stats. There's a lot of economic variables that go into this. For instance, there aren't enough event organizers that can afford a professional statistician, nor are there, even if that were the case, are there enough professional statisticians to be able to cover every single court everywhere. And so the whole theory of scorekeeping courtside, it really becomes more of a supply and demand problem than it becomes a technology problem, is the way I would describe it. And there are other ways. It's not that live scoring should never happen, but there are other ways that data can be collected, such as by video or AI, or as we move forward into the future, many different ways. But understanding what you're actually looking at relative to where you are going is. It's the key. Is what I'm doing worth it? And this failure, is there a shred of learning towards my ultimate goal that I can take out of this? Because if the answer to that question is yes, and it didn't bankrupt you, it's not really a failure. It's a pivot. Pivot, get where you want to go.
Pivot's not a bad word. It's not a cuss word.
It's not a cuss word. It's the only way to get where you want to go, especially if you have a big vision.
Have you found that strategic partners and investors share that sentiment, or does it depend on those people?
Depends on when you're talking to them. People that are watching this right now, I would be sitting here calling yesterday's failure a pivot, and if they were watching this 2 years ago, that they would say, no, that pivot is a failure. This guy's crazy. He's beating his head against the wall.
And I would say those people are still right there where they've always been for the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And those guys and those companies that have broken through that ceiling have now gone on to 10x results.
100%.
Absolutely. Okay, so like we typically do, we're all around this. So let's reel it back. We are in the middle of E-Play. We're barnstorming the country, living in roach motels, trying to survive. Those are whole other stories for another time. We could have another podcast about our adventures on the road, sleeping in train stations, and
confirmed no-shows,
Greyhound
buses.
So much about the travel stuff. I feel like we were a double-A shortstop in baseball. But, those were times that we did a lot of bonding and we learned a lot, absolutely. And so I'm sure a lot of times you call back on those days, when you make decisions now.
Oh, absolutely. I actually say that my time at E-Play, everybody that was a co-founder at this company had to earn that status. And at today's company, at Cerebro, that had to be earned. And my MBA came by way of E-Play. It's what qualified me to lead the company I lead now. And to this day, I'm still within our company, if there's a question about live stats or how we should interact with the company, because again, there are times that live stats is the right fit. Mm-hmm. I get asked a lot of those questions, and I think honestly within our company, I'm probably still the foremost expert on some of these topics.
100%. And let me touch on that just a little bit. In the business that I'm in, where I focus our business right now, and we, for the record, we still are partners. We still do a lot of things together.
Yeah.
And I've got a little bit of a stake there from all the effort we put in. So we're so excited to see where Cerebro's going. And so if you haven't, check them out. We'll post the ability to go to their website, follow up on this story if you want to get involved. We certainly want to do that. But for those that are interested in the arc of how that turned out, we left it off. We created the MVP. We were barnstorming the country. We learned about the pros and cons of trying to be able to collect stats, and we learned the struggles of being an app-based business and competing with all the other. It was a burgeoning industry, and a lot was happening, and we had a lot of struggles getting the actual content, and this huge curve. And it was that our initial brick wall, and we'll talk a little bit about where we went from there, and then what happened. So I'm going to tell what I remember being the big pivot, if you want to say. We had everything ready for a massive launch. We had the NCAA tied up. We had the NBA tied up. We had all the right people in the culture all in line, and then COVID hit. We were all watching the NBA, and somebody marched down to the field and said, you know what, we're going to cancel this game.
Yep.
Somebody's got COVID, and everyone freaked out. We were ready to launch about
March 11th, 2020.
How did you know that date?
I just remember
I'll never forget what
forget.
happened that night. And we all called each other and go, what just happened?
Something ironic, our now head of basketball at Cerebro worked for the Oklahoma City Thunder at the time, which that was the NBA, that they were hosting the game that paused the NBA, and that was symbolic, obviously, of everything globally shutting down. He was in the building that night working that game.
So we, if I recall, had the Final Four lined up. That was our big launch. We had all of our finances, all of our travel plans, and then everything came to a screeching halt that night. And I remember us talking on the phone and going, what just happened? And what are we going to do? I also recall that a good chunk of our leadership team totally freaked out and bailed out.
They did.
They went their own way. It was almost like there was a rooster crowing 3 times and everybody was denying they all... I think it was a valuable lesson for us in CYA. It was fear makes for really bad decisions. And I think if we look back in hindsight, those people that kept their cool are still around. And I think it was also, again, the blessing of a failure, looking back on it now, how through a crucible we learned a lot about people and where they were coming from and what their ultimate goal was, trying to be aligned with us.
Yeah.
That was my take on it. I'd love to hear your take on that night and then the following 6-8 weeks after that, what it meant to you and us and the vision and the dream. Just tell me a little bit about that whole failure period and what did you learn about people, what did you learn about you, and what did you learn about your dream and your vision?
There have been a couple of times in leadership that I feel like things have gotten very, very real. And I've known in the moment, most of the time because somebody will tell me, but like I take a step back and I realize like, ooh, this is like a seminal moment in my leadership. Like this will make me or break me. That was one of two times where that happened. What I learned about people is you're right. I mean, fear begets bad decisions. However, those decisions are typically pretty telling. I mean, drunk words are sober thoughts. I've long heard that, and I think that they were thinking they had one foot out the door, like before that. I don't think they believed in the direction that ultimately I thought the company should go. That's okay. Like, you know, it's fine. I understand that. And I think above all else, you have to trust God's plan. And so in those moments, in those crucible moments, you kind of take a step back and you say, all right, I can have a cool head in this moment because I understand this is just one moment in time, and let me do all I can do, but understand the limitations of what I can do. The rest of this, it's in God's hands. Like, and it will turn out as it's supposed to turn out. It requires a deep humbling because you have to be in the same way you have to be ready to accept failure. And if
so you didn't just put your fingers in your ears and just pretend like none of this was happening.
You can't. Yeah, you can't. Again, I think it's the same exact thing I said on a previous answer, which is if you understand where you are going, the context of where you are going, it just makes everything else so much easier. And the way I look at it is it's a timeline for us to get where we want to go. And we're not all the way there yet, right? We're further, but in each one of these moments, you understand like this could be the moment that ends this journey and we never get there. And I'm okay with it as long as I called a timeout, drew up a play, took a deep breath, went in there, if I'm a quarterback, I made the best pass. I read it, I prepared properly, I made the best pass I possibly could. Whether it's caught or not, I don't have anything to do with that.
And be comfortable with that.
You gotta be comfortable with it.
How'd it turn out?
So far, so good. We're about right here on the timeline, so we're moving the right direction. But you obviously don't know that in those moments. You have truly no idea how it's going to turn out. And I think to a lot of people that can't see this continuum, again, it feels like failure. Like the odds of failure seem so high to people that don't have that context of where it ultimately is going to go. That I think it feels very, very hopeless. But at the same time, I think if you do know where you want to go and you know that at the end of the day, like the product that you are building, in this case, product you're building is going to deliver so much value, it's more of, no, if I can survive, if I can just survive this crucible, I'll take stock of, if I'm going through a hurricane, as long as the ship is still intact, I'll take stock of where everything is in the morning. We can fix all that as long as the ship is still in one piece. If it's not, it's over.
When I look back, I am most disappointed. I got most hurt by the people that said one thing and did another.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for any entrepreneur to know that that's just part and parcel of partnering with people. And so back to the power of failure, we could not have purchased that particular sequence of events to shed light on poor character, poor decisions, and ulterior motives.
Yeah.
That may sound harsh, but that's really what it was. And that's the kind of thing that you want to flesh out. It's very difficult because when you're in the honeymoon and if I remember at that point, everybody was telling us how amazing it was. Mm-hmm. Everybody was telling us, you guys are going to be gazillionaires. You're going to be the entrepreneur, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Nobody cut a check though.
And they all wanted a piece of that. Right.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted that. No one was ready to cut a check. But they all figured, I'm going to be close enough to the action to where I've got my hook in you so that when the rocket ship takes off, I'm going with you, as opposed to saying, you know what, I believe in this. I see the vision and I'm willing to roll up my sleeves, come what may. And that's what hurt me the most. I know that's what hurt you the most.
Definitely.
But we learned so much about the culture of what we were doing and the people we were doing business with, and so that's the only way that flushes a lot of that stuff out.
Oh, 100% true.
Find out, who the...
There are some very, very good people in basketball, and there are some people that, there are some people that are not good. I don't even want to go so far as to say that in this situation, the people that jumped on us, jumped off, were not good people. I definitely wouldn't say that. If they called me right now, I'd take their calls and be cordial.
Well, I think that says a lot about you.
But
I agree with you.
But I think I do think it's revealing, and I think that they were professionals that were making business decisions, and did they oversell how down for the cause they were? I do think so, and that is hurtful, and it is revealing when they realize, this is not that's all you saw was, this rocket ship is not going to be the one that takes off. Yeah. So let me remove my tiny little investment and go make a tiny little investment somewhere else.
It's also interesting when people go through something like that and they decide, I'm just going to go do something similar and compete. I'm going to take what I've done, what I've learned, and leverage that into my own thing. Now, part of that is very natural and positive. I think when you go and you learn something and you get a new skill, that's part of going to the next level of your evolution as a person.
Sure.
It gets a little dicey when you pretty much go in competition with them to a certain extent, or at least in their minds, and then they distance themselves, which is sad. And so part of my journey is also to identify the power of failure, to shed light on the process so that the next entrepreneur can learn, and also know that be prepared for that, and don't get yourself so tied to that relationship that you can't
Don't wrap your self-worth up in any one relationship. I mean, you need to be 100%. You have to have confidence in yourself and know if you're an honest broker to people, like you should have an expectation that is reciprocated. In the moment that it's not, know your worth and move on.
That's great. Very well put. So we left off, COVID hits, and let's not go into all the details of how that went, but suffice to say, something had to change. I know in my case, I had been riding the train for a long time, and I had to make a pivot myself to do some things. Had some stuff going on with my family, and you had to make some decisions. Some great new people came. It was
a really hard time.
It was a tough time.
We knew when COVID arrived, just for abundant clarity, we knew that the drought financially that we had all taken to pursue ePlay was going to be extended. There was no doubt about that. Athletic budgets were slashed, games paused. There was going to be no new data in. There was no budget for there to be an appetite for any of the data to go out. It was just going to be what it was going to be. Like, if you could not survive another 6, 9, 12 months of this, it's, you had to move on.
So as a CEO, you knew, first of all, you read the landscape properly, in my opinion, and then you pulled everybody together and said, I'm going to shoot straight with you. So you pulled back and went on life support. Let everybody know I'm going to be on life support. We're going to be on life support. Nothing's changed here, 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 and here, but I also don't have answers for you here, here, and here.
Yes.
So being straightforward with everybody was, I think, a great thing to share with other entrepreneurs and business owners. You said you were very transparent with them. And you said, here's what I'm going to do. I want you to do what's best for you. But the dream is not dead by any stretch of the imagination. We've got validation. So I'm not.
The end goal is still there.
It's still there. And for what it's worth, we had a machine going, but what happened was we had no fuel in the fire. The game stopped, so we had no data.
Yeah.
And so everything became, okay, what do we do during this interim period? The demand continued to go up.
It actually did, because as soon as basketball came back, which was before the pandemic really ended, I mean, we did our first post-COVID event very much during COVID in August of 2020 in Lincoln, Nebraska. That was our first event back. I mean, it was obviously really surreal.
In fact, didn't it, again, this is another silver lining, when you do you look back on it and realize how many opportunities come out of failure?
Absolutely.
Not only internally, but externally. You had other companies jumping ship, freaking out, and it was almost like, I like to tell a story, I want to be Forrest Gump out there on the only person with a shrimp boat when everybody else is freaked out and crashed.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you collect, if I'm not mistaken, the spotlight turned to you and this guy and this group of people that was creating real data out of 5-year-old pieces of paper, scorecards.
Definitely.
You literally had a blueprint to make gold with straw. You just needed more straw.
Absolutely.
And so the draft was coming up. There were kids either decide to enter the portal or figure out. So you had this huge demand now of the scouting world going, we can't get on a plane and fly to Nebraska.
Yep.
So you jumped in and filled the void. You had the internal pivot with the company. I think there were some other things to do. So you decided to repackage ePlay and kind of pivot and go to a new, you might describe that a little bit, but you started to fill the void because it was almost even the demand in certain areas cranked up.
It did, yeah. For sure, it did. The same thing was true of sports streaming services, youth sports streaming services. Anytime you can't be there in person, you have to figure out how to know what happened there. Because
you'd already built partnerships with a lot of those people because they were wanting the stats to go along with the game.
Absolutely. I mean, I was telling you right before we came on air here that one of those old partners from way back in the day, I mean, I literally just got off the phone with him about an hour ago. So all of these, it's a relatively small world, and those relationships that we developed back at ePlay, I mean, oftentimes I'm still talking to them here at Cerebro now. But yeah, that was a very surreal time where the market was, I would just say the market was changing, and that change, it felt pretty volatile. So, you know, it was just, everything was different. The NBA draft was different, like the way that it was conducted, and people like began forecasting the future. That's where I think people really began to embrace us, because they were beginning to embrace the future. I think this is true in many verticals, that COVID just accelerated the future, right? And a lot of those conveniences, that the type of stuff where, I don't have to go do this in person anymore, those were hyper fueled during that time. Now you do see them receding some, like you can look at Zoom stock and see it's come back down, but nonetheless, like, do you genuinely believe now that it's an option to not go in person and to take a virtual meeting? Now compare your thinking today to your thinking back in 2019, and I promise you that it's different. The likelihood of you taking a Zoom meeting now in the same city as someone else is a lot higher than it was.
So you're saying those guys that we met with that gave us the blank stares and their eyes rolled back when we were saying, this is the future, this is how you're going to get data, this is how you're going to interact with people. Now, those barriers are gone.
The ones that said that it was a spectrum, right? So you had some of those guys that would say, no way, no how with data, not interested, even if you did it for free. Those people came around and they're like, everybody's just softened their stance. Those that said, if you do it for free, fine. Those people, they invest a little bit now. And the people that were willing to invest a little bit, they invest a lot now. You know, they're spending like tens of thousands of dollars every year on data collection. So everybody's just, they took a step forward, and the crazy thing was the entire world took one big step towards the future altogether. Sometimes it was exacerbated, didn't have to be as extreme. Zoom, again, great example, 100% of meetings had to be on Zoom. Obviously, that's not the case now, but look at your likelihood, period over period, and I guarantee you're more likely to take a meeting on Zoom. And similarly, people are a lot more, have a much stronger appetite for data, and I'm sure, streaming games remotely.
Right, absolutely. So let me give you just a few seconds to talk about Cerebro and how that came out of the ashes of ePlay. Tell me where you are now, then I've got a couple of wrap-up questions for you about moving forward and some of the things you learned looking back, okay? So tell me a little bit about, so that we can kind of wrap this up, the ePlay jump to Cerebro. A lot of things you've been doing since I've been busy doing some stuff, and so I'd like to just kind of bring the folks up to speed on kind of where you are now. We talked about the lessons you learned. How have you applied some of those, and what's Cerebro all about now?
No doubt. Well, I joked that the one thing I learned was I didn't want to be a data collector, but instead a data aggregator, which is true.
Sure.
I think it's data collection is a very profitable space for the people that figure out how to do it the right way. The great blessing of 2020 was a realization by so many event operators event organizers that decided that they wanted to have stats. They needed more than what we could handle at ePlay. They needed numerous data collection providers, and so we immediately saw that there was a better mousetrap. In particular, the breaking down of game film is because all the games were streamed. Now you could just have a video breakdown operation. There were Huddle already existed, Crossover already existed, VidSwap already existed. These services were in the best position to scale stat collection. And so we immediately said, okay, well, we know that no one of those video breakdown companies is going to have 100% of the market. So there needs to be a hub, one single hub, that is aggregating all of that in a way that can allow recruiters to navigate a funnel. Let me see all the players that do X, Y, and Z. Boom. Okay, now these are all the players on Huddle, Synergy, VidSwap, et cetera, right? And then we can act as a great lead gen out to those video breakdown companies, because if you want to see the film or the clips, which is their primary core competency, all they have to do is hand us box scores and we can put them in this massive data aggregation hub. So that was the real benefit, was realizing we didn't want to be a data collector, but instead we wanted to be a data aggregator. But yeah, I mean, there was that time was tumultuous. There were a few people that did answer the question in the positive that yes, I do want to stick around and be a part of this. So we started a new company that again was not a data collector, but was rather a data aggregator. But a lot of the same skill sets still apply. So our chief of product and obviously one of my co-founders, John Cho, he had spent 2 decades with the Rockets doing a lot of data related stuff. And so he naturally is the person to build the world's largest NBA quality data hub.
My guy.
Man.
You know you're the man.
Yeah, there is not a harder worker in the game.
Amazing guy.
In any game. Like this dude.
He thinks he's really funny.
You are funny, John. You are funny. I still have to work with him.
That's true.
And Ed Chow, also my co-founder, heads up operations for us. So smart and so well organized, which is something that I'm not. You know, we kind of, I talked earlier about the need for co-founders, and that was another area that I kind of lacked. And he was coming on the scene around that time, helped us to realize that, hey, the mission itself post 2020 is a little bit different. The team needs to be a little bit different. We need to kind of strip this thing down to the bolts and start over. And that was the hardest part of that time period. Honestly, it was not the people. For me, it wasn't the people that didn't want to be there anymore, because to be honest with you, forget those people. It was the people that did. And we didn't really have the bandwidth to be able to, and it was more of it wasn't our core team, it was the ancillary initiatives, but some of those had to be cut, because we had to start from square one, build the fundamentals of the business, and then like we are now, begin to scale back up to doing some of those things. There are so many, I'll just kind of say this in closing, there are so many elements required for success. A great idea is just the first one. Then you need execution. But even beyond execution, you need a market that is ready for you. I think a lot of the concepts of ePlay were ahead of their time. and the market wasn't ready for us, and that shows itself in failure. But again, failure, find the silver lining. That's your pivot. You still get to the spot first. At the end of the road, you can still get to the spot first as long as you are constantly iterating along the way.
Wow, couldn't have said it better myself. So what I think, rather than, the future is so bright for Cerebro, rather than getting into a whole update on that, and I really hope that this video has some evergreen to it, because I'm hoping 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years from now, it's going to be crazy to look back on this video. But we'll try to post some links if you want to get an update on Cerebro, what they're doing right now. Just some super cool stuff, very cool stuff. They are on the bleeding edge of what's happening out there. Congratulations on Mark's involvement. I remember sitting in a coffee shop going, wouldn't it be really cool someday if Mark Cuban reaches out?
I was right there with you.
You need to know that part of Ryan's journey was, amongst many stops along the way, as a ball boy for the Mavericks, out there getting the sweat from Dirk. The great Dirk, who is going to be in the Hall of Fame.
He'll be in the Hall of Fame this year.
We're about to get the unveiling of the
statue in 2 days.
So, big time man crush. We were there the last night. You were there the second.
We were there together.
Night, I think, and
I was there for the last home game, and then we had business in Austin.
We made sure
we made business in Austin.
No, San Antonio.
Well, we decided, we wrapped up our meetings, and we just headed an hour or so south.
We drove all day and then all night back to be there for the final game.
Well, yeah, I the biggest thing I remember is just making sure that I had a waiver to cry that night, because it was tough. It was tough.
Yeah. You were there for the whole
Truly would not be here. I started that driveway basketball league back in 2003.
You're going to get emotional about
this. Not today. I got it together today.
Okay.
But back in 2003, when the Mavericks went to the Western Conference Finals, I got to be Dirk, and I had my dad be Tim Duncan in the Spurs, and we just had these two teams. We played a little playoff series with a couple of neighborhood kids, and I mean that grew into like a league. Which, long story short, I would not be here today if the big German hadn't been in Dallas.
That explains why you always made me Dwayne Wade. So, I don't know what that says about our relationship.
I just like dunking on you perpetually.
Easy to do. But you know what I did? I just flopped and I coughed a little bit.
I'm just kidding, D-Wade. If you want to invest, we're still open for business.
No, I have no desire to be involved at all. Man, so much we could talk about. Maybe we'll do some follow-up. Talk to me just a little bit about, from your perspective, the journey you've been on, where you are at Cerebro. Tell me a little bit about the role of, right now, ETW is really focusing on content. Mm-hmm. We're in the creation business. And a lot of times creating things means building an MVP.
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes on to that, because branding is so important and the visual is so important. And today we need an intro video to explain something. Tomorrow we need content to train our internal people how to do things. There's just so much. And we're so visual heavy, we're so multimedia heavy, and there's so many tools out there. Speak just a little bit about, from your position as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, all the things you've got to juggle, the importance of content that you use internally, content that you use externally, and how do you go about that? And talk to me a little bit about your experience working with us, and then kind of now where you come, just in the big picture of that importance, and where do you turn to, and what's your position with everything exploding now, everything from the tools we have to AI to this and that and the other. What's your perspective, and what would you tell another entrepreneur about that part of your business?
Man, I mean, as it relates to us specifically, we are still in the process of educating the world on who we are, what we do, why analytics are important. We have 7 metrics that help to describe a basketball player. So making that a universal language is extremely important to us, us obtaining our objectives. So
you've got education and promotion.
Exactly.
All happening.
Education and promotion. So when you ask about the role of content in our business, it's both of those things. Now, at times you can serve both purposes. But I think the way you do that is, for us, it's through content marketing. And, I continue to be well aware of my limitations. We have great scouts. We've just recently announced some more great scouts that we've added. Next week, there will be even more. Those scouts produce a lot of this content that makes our metrics and our language normal, and it normalizes it, puts in like daily use because people are used to reading these types of articles. But I continue to know that I have limitations, and whether that's the content that needs to be written from a basketball perspective or video that needs to be produced. I think that companies like East to West are in a great position to be able to help companies like mine with things like content marketing. Again, whether it's from an educational perspective or a promotional perspective, or with content marketing, it's great to, no matter what industry you're in, to set yourself up as a thought leader. And I mean, content marketing slides right in there, right pieces that tell people about, some a new roofing material or whatever it is. I think you guys are in a great position to be able to actually help people tell stories of any type, and I'm grateful to the extent you guys have helped us tell ours.
Thank you, by the way. Do you find yourself being able to use some of these techniques to multiply yourself in terms of getting the message out? In other words, there's that feeling of, man, I just can't be in enough places enough time, and I can't inject what's in my brain into my co-founders and everything.
Absolutely.
So, have you had any success being able to use any of those tools? Can you expound on that just a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think as far as internally goes, it's we have produced some content that gets shared around our company, and increasingly as we add people to the team, we'll have we anticipate, I need to talk to you about some videos that we need to produce that will be for onboarding and that kind of thing. But I think externally, there's with the video content, hopefully the launch of a podcast in the relatively near future, our written content, we know that there's a need for us to, especially in 2023 with our consumer launch, make a jump in SEO. There's a million different needs, and it's the only way that we're going to be able to. It's the ultimate force multiplier, right? That's really what it is.
It's been such a blessing afterwards because there's no pushback at all now. Now
Yeah.
People are like going, crap, yeah, So we haven't talked about. Maybe we'll do another one where we talk about just the whole commercial side of the parents and trying to get recruited thing. There's just so many avenues, and I'm interested to know, because I haven't kept up with it and I feel bad, but I'd love to know, what have you guys put in the can? What is out there to help? And are you just a one-arm paper hanger where I'm just doing everything I can to keep up with Mark and keep up with our investors, and to be able to put those messages out there to where I can just go, let me send you a link.
Yeah.
Before we meet, let me send you this link, and it's going to answer 70-80% of your questions. And so when we get on the call, you're already going to know the pitch. You're already going to know what I'm trying to say. You're already going to know I've nipped all that in the bud. The same thing with bringing new people on. Look, after you watch these 3 videos, then let's do a conference call.
Yep.
Because we need to decide, is it even worth meeting, or I'm going to answer, because you got to be beat down just giving the spiel over and over and over.
Hiring Derek has helped a lot. He's like, I don't take event operator pitches anymore. I don't really do much on
What's Derek's role?
He's the head of basketball. So
he's literally from that side of it. He can tell that story and go through all the value propositions.
I get to watch a lot of pitches now. I watch a lot of pitches.
That's good.
Yeah.
Boy,
so
the table's turned there.
Oh man, have they? Well, he's got to earn his seat on the rocket ship, so that's his job.
I'll look forward to meeting with him.
He's great guy.
That's awesome.
Now this has been a lot of fun.